everyone, welcome to the OklaRoots YouTube channel. In today's tutorial, we are going to make the most unique, structured, technical bag I think I've done yet on this channel. Today, we're gonna make the Luna Retro bag. Take a look at that. And this comes to us from Rosa Patterns. All right, this bag looks cool. It is a cool looking bag. It is just like this crescent, well, not kind of a crescent shape. It has like a half moon shape. It has a lot of curvy details without being challenging like a lot of curvy bags can be. The gusset has this beautiful accent on it. Oh, I don't know if you guys can see with the yellow. We're gonna get into it more in the video today. This is, in my opinion, a really fun bag to make. I enjoyed every single step of this bag. However, it is incredibly technical. Not hard, just very, very precise and specific. And so you have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. If you miss something, if you don't read all the instructions, there's a good chance you're gonna be getting that seam ripper out. Trust me, I did it. So let's go through this bag. You have a front panel and a back panel. This awesome accent here is actually not a slip pocket, which totally threw me. In today's video, I'm gonna try to make it a slip pocket. So I'm gonna try to make both the front and the back slip pockets. We don't have any sort of exterior zippers or anything like that. We have the most unique straps. This strap is made of like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces, which is so cool. So you have like a main strap, you have connector straps, you have little keepers here. Like I said, very technical. On the inside of the bag, you're going to have one zipper pocket in the lining, and then you're going to have this adorable little slip pocket on the side over here. I do suggest, like the pattern says, you use a lightweight vinyl. I'll be honest, the yellow vinyl here is a great lightweight, medium weight vinyl. However, my exterior vinyl I'm using is a little bit more on the heavy side, and it definitely was difficult with these straps. We are making our own straps today. You could probably use webbing instead, but I did make my own. Whatever you choose to use, guys, this bag is cool. This bag is really cool. Okay, let me show you what this bag looks like on, okay? There's really not a whole lot to it, but it does require quite a lot of hardware you might not have. So I am 5 feet 4 inches, a size small or medium. This is how it hangs. It is an adjustable strap, but it is not a removable strap. So you have 2 sliders to help you adjust it. However, everything fits very, very tightly. So I would suggest once you get it to the size you want, you just leave it. I wouldn't be adjusting this bag a whole lot from day to day. So thank you so much to Rosa, as always, for allowing me to use your patterns on the channel. Rosa has some very classic, wonderful bags. She also has some incredibly cool, unique bags that you've never seen anywhere else. Like, you know, sometimes like we'll see a pattern come out and it's a bag design that we've seen a lot of, like we just see it popular, you know, just in day-to-day life. With Rosa, not always. Some of them, yes, are classic shapes. They're gonna always look good no matter what year or generation it is. But then you're gonna have some really cool ones. Like we had a triangle bag, but previously that was really cool. This is another one of those. It's just very, very neat. So I highly encourage you to give bags like this a try. You're gonna learn so much. I learned so much, and I make at least 1 bag a week. Actually, I make at least 2 bags a week, and I've been doing that for years. So if I'm still learning from a pattern like this, there's a good chance you're gonna learn something too. If you're new to the OklaRoots YouTube channel, please consider clicking subscribe down below. If at any point you like this video, please give it a like. Any questions, comments, shout outs, any other patterns you want to see from Rosa, leave them down in the comment section. I haven't made my way through all of them. There are quite a few options. They are all stunning. I'm working my way. I'm working my way through the Rosa patterns, but God, this one is just so cool. Okay, guys, let's get started. So for this bag, you're gonna need at least a yard of exterior material. This needs to be like a soft vinyl or soft faux leather. Nothing too dense. I used pretty heavy duty material in that first bag, and it can be tricky, especially with the straps. So just remember, you have a lot of layers when you're doing the straps. So I'm gonna be mixing it up with just 2 pieces of material because I do like the contrast of the front pocket with the base of the bag, but you could just do one material if you wanted. Then you're gonna need a yard of your lining. I'm using a water resistant canvas. It's nice and light. I don't have to interface it. It's durable, easy to work with, my favorite type of lining. And then at least a 30 yard of Decoville heavy. Now this is important because this is where the structure of the bag is gonna come from. not so much the material. If you're using a woven material, or if you just like to beef up your material a little bit more, you can add woven interfacing as well. You'll need about 1.5 yards of that. So here is my hardware for today. I have 2 3/4 inch wide swivel hooks, 2 3/4 inch wide strap sliders, and 2 3/4 inch wide triangle rings. And then also 2 3/4 inch wide strap ends. I know 3/4 of an inch is kind of maybe it's a size you don't have. On the first bag, I did change everything to 1 inch. You just got to make sure you change all the measurements on the straps and all the pieces that attach to this as well. So when we go through all those long rectangle pieces, those will need to be a little bit wider to accommodate a 1 inch hardware, but it can be done. I just happened to find the 3/4 inch hardware in my stash, and so I'm going to use it. Then you're going to need some rivets. Now I have 2 long rivets. So my long rivets are 9 millimeters wide on top of the rivet. So this part right here is 9 millimeters, but then the stem, the long bit here, that's 12 millimeters. You want these long. You have a lot of layers on that strap. I had to order these for this bag because I did not have long enough rivets. So you're gonna need 2 of those long ones, and then I'm also gonna be using 4 just standard rivets. And I'm gonna, just for my attempt to make a slip pocket on the outside of the bag, hopefully it works out. Let me do the work so you don't have to. I have my bag tag over here, and then I have a little woven bag tag to insert into the lining. I have a couple of labels because whenever we're attaching the straps, we need to keep track of what's going to be for the left, what's going to be for the right. And I find these little labels are actually really helpful with that. And then, I know some of you guys are going to hate this, I have a hand sewing needle and a thimble. It's literally for like 4 pieces of thread. We just have to thread a long thread through 1 piece of material. It's not that big of a deal, but it would be easier if you had some sort of a needle to help you do that. And it gives it a much more finished look. So don't forget your zippers. You're gonna have 2 zippers for this bag. You're gonna have a longer zipper that's 15 inches long with a zipper pull. I'm using number 5 zippers, I recommend that. And then a smaller zipper that's 7 inches wide. This will be for a lining pocket. It should also have 1 zipper pull. And then you can make your own zipper end if you'd like, but this is going to have kind of like a loosey-goosey zipper end that we tuck in the bag. So I'm gonna use some metal hardware for that. I know it's not silver or nickel like everything else in the bag is, but it's because I don't have one. So we're gonna go with the rose gold one. Honestly, if you're in my situation where you don't have some things, this is not seen at all. So you could just use a piece of your faux leather or your vinyl and attach it to the end of this and tuck it in, and nobody would ever know. Use what you got. All right, bringing out lots of tools today. First, for my rivet, I have my rivet press, the die set to set the rivets, and then I also have a hole punch. I have a good amount of plastic clover clips. I have some Beacon 3-in-1 glue. This is going to be helpful for the strap ends and also my bag tag. I have a lighter to kind of clean up any little loose threads, a turning wand just in case I need it, a 1 inch by 6 inch ruler, 2 marking tools, one that's an air erasing, one that's a silver ink pen. I always suggest you have 2 because one might not work on the material you're working with, a seam ripper as always, a lighter. Oh, I already said a lighter. I don't need 2 lighters. And then I have 2 double-sided tapes. I have a 1/4 inch wide and an 1/8 of an inch wide double-sided tape. I never really know which one I'm going to need, and it's just nice to have options. So I have both of those. I have some duct tape here. This is kind of a narrow duct tape. This is just to put over the back of my middle bag tag so it doesn't rip through the lining over time. And then some screwdrivers to help set those screws in the strap ends. And here are the tools that I keep with me at the sewing machine. First, we have the thread that's going to go through the needle, and this is going to be a Tex 45 weight thread. It's from Saya Swag. The color is buttercream. In the bobbin, I have a Mara 100 weight thread. I have a pair of snips and a stiletto, and the needle I'll be using is a Microtex 8012 needle. So let's go through our pattern pieces. First, you have pattern piece A. This is going to be kind of the background of the exterior of the bag. You're going to have 2 of your exterior materials and 2 of your lining materials. There's actually no stabilizer for this part, but honestly, if you wanted to add stabilizer, you could. I would just make sure it's about 1/2 of an inch smaller on all the edges. If you want to apply that Deco heavy here, I might try this bag a 3rd time and do that. I'm not going to do it today though, because I do want to see how the structure of the bag holds up with the alternate method of attaching that outer panel. All right, pattern piece B is your kind of cool but tricky panel. This is going to be that accent on the outside of the bag. This is really what gives it its look. This is also going to be how the bag is held up with the straps over here on the short ends. Like I said, we're going to modify this today so that we have these as slip pockets, but for the pattern, it's really just decorative and a way to hold the straps in place. So you're gonna need your exterior material, and you're gonna also need some lining material. And then pattern piece D is going to be for the stabilizer. So please make sure you note that the Decoville Heavy is a smaller cut than the outside. We don't really want to be sewing this into seams. Pattern piece C is going to be your gusset. You're gonna need 1 cut of your exterior material and 1 cut of your lining material. Also, there is no Decoville Heavy on this. But once again, if you wanted to add kind of a skinny strip to this, I think you could definitely do that for a very structured bag. So we have a lot of different strap pieces today, and you're gonna wanna make sure you keep track of what everything is. First, you're gonna have a long strap. This is either gonna be the shoulder strap or your crossbody strap. I'm using the shoulder strap size, but on my body, I'm 5'4". I'm a bit on the petite size. I find it kind of fits like a crossbody with the shoulder length strap. So it is a generous shoulder length. Then you have 2 side connectors. Now these actually work in tandem with the longer strap, which gives you a lot of extra length on this bag. It's also really decorative. Next up, you have the lower connector. This is going to be a nice detail on the very bottom of the bag on that gusset. This is also going to be what holds the D-ring connectors. And then finally, you're going to have your strap keeper. This is a little piece of material that's going to hold everything together on the straps. Like I said, I'm using 3/4 inch hardware, so I'm using the sizes in the pattern. However, if you're using 1 inch hardware, you're gonna need to widen pretty much all of these pieces except for the strap keeper. The strap keeper, you're actually gonna make it a little bit longer. So for the strap and the side connectors, I would add 1 inch to the width of this, making it a little bit wider to accommodate 1 inch hardware. And then for your lower connector, I would add 1/2 inch to the width. And then to your strap keeper, I would add about 1.5 inches to 2 inches to the length, because since these are going to be wider, the little thing that goes around all the straps needs more room. So that's my suggestion. That's what I did on my first bag. Okay, next up we have our lining pockets. You have a slip pocket here, which is a little oval. This is actually just the center of the oval from the panel B that we cut from the lining. So when you cut that out, just don't cut inside of this, and now you have that. If you want to trace it on another piece of material so you have an accent, you can. It's just the inner oval of pattern piece B. That's all it is. Then you're going to have your zipper pocket facing, and then 2 cuts for your zipper pocket on the inside of the bag. All this is with a lining material. I'm not attaching any interfacing to this at all, but if you had quilt cotton, you would want to attach that. All right, so first things first, let's attach our stabilizer to our accent pocket. I'm going to call it a slip pocket because that's what I'm using today. One thing you're going to do is on the back of this panel B, you're going to want to mark the midpoint on these short edges. You can use a template for that, or you can just fold it in half and find it. Do the same thing with your Decoville Heavy, and that's going to allow you to just use those marks to line this up, and that way you're not like mushing it around for, 5 minutes trying to figure out how it's all supposed to lay out. It just makes it easier. All right, so I always like to lay a scrap piece of quilt cotton over the back of my stabilizer. You could just iron on it. It's not the end of the world if you do. I'm just a little nervous. I prefer to press stabilizer from the right side of the material. However, since this is a faux leather vinyl, we don't want to do that. So I'm just going to press it from the back. And again, just any piece of quilt cotton, you can still use it. It's not going to get dirty or anything. It just protects my iron. There we go. So I'm going to do those sides first, and then I'm just going to move this up and go around, pressing the stabilizer to that panel. So once you have this all prepped, you can set it to the side. Letting that stabilizer set for a little while is really helpful to make sure it doesn't get all wrinkly when we turn the bag out later. So even if you could do this the day before, that's great, but just giving it a good amount of time to set is going to help with the end result. All right, so now on the back of your lower connector, your side connectors, and your strap, you're going to mark a midpoint line running along the long edges. You also want to do this for your little strap keeper as well. So let's just focus on the strap keeper and the lower connector for just a moment. Now we're going to grab our double-sided tape, and if you're using material that is a little bit more lightweight, like a water-resistant canvas or a quilt cotton, you can just iron this, but I find the tape is really helpful. We're just going to lay the tape right over that midpoint mark. Do this for both the lower connector and your little strap keeper. And then you can remove the paper from the tape and fold each long raw edge back, wrong sides together, to meet that midpoint mark. Now we're going to use a lot of clips here because I find that the tape doesn't always hold it for as long as we need it to be held, because this is going to have to stay for the rest of the bag making. So I'm going to add some clips along the raw edges as well. And you could just use clips, that's fine. I find clips and tape is helpful. So repeat this for the lower connector. All right, this is how both of the lower connector and the little strap keeper should be with the raw edges on the back. You can set these to the side for just a moment. Next, you're gonna take your side connectors and your long strap, and you're going to repeat that process, folding the long raw edges back to meet the midpoint line. You do not have to use double-sided tape here, and I wouldn't, because this midpoint line that we marked, that's gonna end up being an edge. And so when you top stitch, you would be top stitching through quite a bit of double-sided tape because the double-sided tape will be folded in on itself. So if you're used to that and you have no problem stitching over the tape, then go for it. And then once you have both the long edges folded back to meet that midpoint line, then you're gonna fold this in half again, tucking in those raw long edges. So you have one single fold on one side and a double fold on the other side. And just attach each edge to the clip. That's its opposite. Okay, so this is what one of the side connectors should look like. You're gonna repeat this process for the other side connector and for the long strap. This just takes a while. And remember, if you don't wanna build your own straps, you can use webbing. Just make sure it's the right size. Okay, so now we're gonna top stitch, but we're gonna top stitch everything except the lower connector. The lower connector does not get top stitched. We're going to attach that later to the gusset. So you can set the lower connector to the side. But for the rest of these, you're going to top stitch everything at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along all the edges. The double fold, the single folds, the short edges, the little strap keeper here along all the edges of that as well. Everything, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance top stitching. Take your time with this. All right, once you have all of your straps top stitched, you can set these to the side. Okay, so now we're gonna work on the overlay, which is a lot of kind of like tedious steps, but they're not difficult. So the first thing you're gonna do is take your exterior piece that has the deckable heavy on it, and you're gonna cut little slits all around the inside here. So they're about 3/8 of an inch apart. I don't measure, but they don't cut all the way up to the deckable heavy. So only cut them about an 1/8 of an inch away from the deckable heavy. So when you cut them, they should have a little bit of space still before it reaches the stabilizer. Then you're gonna grab some double-sided tape, and we're going to attach the double-sided tape right on the edge of the stabilizer. So all the way around. And remember, with double-sided tape, you can kind of wrinkle it and crinkle it around the corners. You don't have to worry about it, staying super flat. Just get it attached. All right, once you have the tape attached, you can remove the paper from it and then gently fold those little cuts back and attach them to the tape. And you can always add clips to this as well if you feel like the tape's not going to be strong enough to hold it back the whole time. Here we go. So you should see when you flip this over, you have a nice smooth curve on the right side. Now I am going to add clips like the pattern suggests, just to hold it back. You don't have to add a ton of clips, but enough so that the material doesn't try to pull away from the stabilizer. All right, set this to the side for just a moment. Okay, so now on your lining side, we're gonna need to make some marks. So if you wanna use an air erasing marker and you think you can do this quick enough, go ahead and do that. Otherwise, use like a silver ink pen. And what we wanna do is we wanna go around and we wanna mark a 1/2 of an inch away from that inner circle. Okay, so I'm not sure if you can see, but I marked 1/2 of an inch around the inside circle here, and then I marked 1 1/8 inch out from that also raw inner edge here. I used my little inner seam tool to help make a rounded line around that first 1/2 inch one, but for the 1 1/8 one, I just have these little dash lines everywhere using a regular ruler. So then you're gonna take your scissors and you're gonna cut little slits into that raw edge, going from the raw edge up to the 1/2 inch mark, and make sure it comes up to that 1/2 inch mark. See, this one's a little bit trickier because we can't just wrap it around stabilizer like we did with the exterior panel. Okay, once you have that snip, now you're gonna take double-sided tape and you're gonna add it just inside that 1 1/8 inch marked edge all the way around. Then remove the paper from your double-sided tape. And then fold back your little slits to meet that 1 1/8 inch mark. This is where you gotta be kind of quick if you're using an air erasing marker, because it does erase quickly on water resistant canvas. I'm gonna also use clips here because double-sided tape doesn't do great with water-resistant canvas. Once you have that tape down, then you're gonna grab even more double-sided tape and you're gonna add this double-sided tape right around the edge of the folded down bits. This is gonna help secure them and it's gonna help you attach this to the exterior panel. So you can see I'm just adding it right over the ends of those little flaps. All right, once you have your exterior and your lining all prepped, you're gonna lay them right sides together. So just flop them over one another. And if you have midpoints marked, use those to line everything up. You should have midpoints on the sides and also on the kind of chubbier ends as well. So you're gonna use more clips here. I know there's a lot. And you're going to line up the outer edges of your lining panel and your exterior panel. Like I said, use the midpoint marks on the skinny edges and also the thicker edges to line it up first. And then just clip around the entire raw edge, just like I said, on the outside, not the inside. The inner circle we're gonna leave alone for now. Okay, once you have the outer edge clipped, you're gonna sew along that outer edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Take your time and backstitch at the beginning and the end. Once again, leave the inner edge completely alone, only the outer edge. So once I have it sewn down, I'm just gonna take my scissors and cut the seam allowance in half along the entire outer edge. And if you'd like, you can cut a couple of small slits in the seam, just a few around the rounded edges to help this spread out. Just make sure your cuts don't get too close to the thread. Now, flip this right side out gently. Careful not to lose the double-sided tape or your clips. So just take your time with this. And I like to just smooth out that sewn edge and add clips to keep it from kind of rolling in on itself. But you're not top stitching that yet, so leave it alone. Okay, this is a big mess, but before I address this inner oval here, I'm gonna attach my bag tag. Now, if you're gonna stitch down this entire accent onto your bag and not go the slip pocket route that I'm trying out, then you will do this later. However, if you wanna make this a slip pocket and you wanna use a bag tag, now's the time to add it. You cannot do this with a sew-on tag. Obviously, you can only do this with a metal bag tag. So if you wanna do a sew-on tag, I would suggest you do it on the main panel, panel A, not on this accent piece here. So I found the midpoint on the edge that's going to be the front of my panel, and I just marked it with an erasing marker by folding it in half and marking it. It's about the midpoint. It's hard to find with all these clips. But then I measured 2 inches down from that and centered my washer, and this is where I'm gonna put my metal tag. I'm just gonna plop it in right there. So I'm gonna also add a piece of stabilizer. Actually, I don't need this on the back because I already have stabilizer on the back. So I'm just going to carefully grab my seam ripper, and I'm not going through the lining. I'm only going through the exterior and the stabilizer, and be really, really careful here, because if you mess this up, you did all that work. So now I'm just gonna pull the prongs on my metal bag tag, and I like to add glue to the back of these bag tags just to give them a little bit more support. I'm gonna carefully insert the tag into the slits, and then I'm going to spread the lining away from the exterior and attach the washer. And I like to fold the prongs in on themselves, look at the front, make sure it's straight-ish, and then finally I'll just grab a small piece of masking tape and place this over the prongs on the back so that these prongs don't wear down on the lining and create a problem. There we go. Bag tag done. Okay, so once you have your tag and everything installed, what we're gonna do is we're gonna lift up our lining and we're gonna find our tape, and we're gonna remove the paper from the tape carefully without detaching the tape from the lining. So now we're going to press our lining wrong sides together with the exterior and clip in place. And the lining should come a bit below the exterior top edge. You don't want the lining peeking out in the end. So in some areas you might find that you kind of have to push your lining down a little bit. That's okay. And in some areas you might find you have to actually pull your lining quite a bit in because it's like too narrow, especially on the short bits here. That's also fine. You just want your lining fold to come just under the exterior fold You don't want it too far below it because then it won't catch it when we top stitch. Okay, so this is where we're at. Take a look at the front, make sure everything looks good, specifically on this inner oval. Now I'm going to change it up a little bit from the pattern. The pattern's going to have you top stitch just a section of the inner oval and a section of the outer oval. I'm going to top stitch the entire inner oval because, like I said, I'm leaving this as a slip pocket. If you're not, follow the pattern. So the first thing I'm going to do is go and top stitch around this entire inner circle here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure I catch the lining on the back, and I'm going to leave the tails of the top thread and the bobbin thread long so I can tie them off on the back. Okay, so you see how I have these long threads here? What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull them both to the lining side. So I'm going to take the bobbin threads here on the back and give it a little tug, and then I'm going to pull up on the loop of the thread from the top and pull it back, and do this for both of them. And now you can just tie these off by taking 2 and 2 and then just tying like 3 really tight knots. And honestly, that would be fine. You could also thread all of the threads through a needle and pull them through the material, which is what I'm gonna do. So I have 3 tight knots with my threads. And now I'm going to take a hand needle, and this is a, let's see what size this is. It says a number 24 embroidery needle. I just wanted a needle that has a big eye. That's the only thing, because I'm going to put these thick threads through it. So I'm going to grab my needle, and I'm going to insert it right next to my knot, and I'm going to push it through underneath the water-resistant canvas, but not through the faux leather on the front, just like that. And I'm going to have it poke out a little bit over here on the left. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, one at a time, thread my threads through the needle. Now, I found that if I did all 4 of them at once, it got a bit knotted. So I'm just going to do 2 at a time. I'm going to put 2 of the threads through the needle. And then I'm just going to carefully push this through the material and then pull it out over here on the left. And you see how the threads are just like poking out from the material? That's what I want. And so I'm going to do that with the other 2 as well. So once again, I'm just going to poke my needle in next to the knot, push it through, and then back out through some spot on the lining. And then I'm going to put both the threads through the needle and then pull the needle through the material just like that. And then I can just cut down these tails and give the material a little zhuzh like that. And there you go. You have a kind of like a hidden threads. And it helps keep it neat looking. All right, so like I said, the only reason I top stitched the inside of this entirely is because I'm hoping to make these slip pockets. If you're doing what the pattern suggests, you will only top stitch the sides here. You're gonna leave the main part of the inner untop stitch because you'll do that when you attach it to the bag. But now we're gonna work on the outside of this panel. And the first thing you wanna do is mark the midpoint. So we're just gonna fold this in half. Isn't it already looking so cute? It's a lot of prep work. It's a lot of prep work. But after we get this part done, it's pretty quick. So I'm just going to fold this in half. I'm going to grab an air erasing marker, and I'm going to mark the midpoint on the fold at the top. And I'm going to use a ruler, and I'm going to mark 3 inches to the left and 3 inches to the right of that midpoint mark on the outer edge on both sides. So you have 6 inches, like a 6-inch gap on each side that you have marked right in the center. Okay, so now I'm gonna go to the sewing machine and I'm going to top stitch just between these marks. So these 2 6-inch windows, I'm only top stitching there. I'm leaving the threads long at the beginning and the end because we're gonna tie those back later. If you were doing the inner part of this, you're gonna do the same thing on the inside. So you're just gonna top stitch on the inside on the corners just a bit and leave the inner longer bits untouched. But for me, I'm just doing the outsides. So now that you have that and you have your threads nice and long, you're going to very carefully grab your bobbin threads and pull on your bobbin thread so that you can get a little loop of your top thread on the back and pull that top thread back. So do this for all 4 or 8 if you also did the inside of your beginning and ending threads. Okay, some more kind of creative prepping. These are our 2 exterior A panels. First, I marked the midpoints on the straight edge. I should probably mark the midpoints on the rounded edge as well. I'll do that later. So mark the midpoints on the straight edges. I taped down the left one over here, and then I used a ruler and measured 2 inches over and used the midpoint marks to center them so that this one is the same position as the left one, and they're centered and 2 inches apart, okay? That's the goal here. So you should be using a gridded mat when you're doing this, and it's gonna be a lot easier, but I'm not because, again, for the videos. So what I did was I just grabbed some double-sided tape and I just marked where the midpoint is between these 2 marks. So at the 1 inch mark here, 1 inch mark here, I used that tape to help me find the middle between these 2 panels. And now you should have the midpoint marked on the edge of your contrast panel here. If it has faded like mine has, you're gonna wanna remark it because we need the midpoints here. Now this is gonna be a little tricky for me. If you're going with the pattern, you're gonna put some double-sided tape on the lining side here, and you're gonna tape this down onto your A panels. But since I wanna leave this, I mean, I could use double-sided tape and then remove it. I think I will do that. I'll use double-sided tape and then I'll take it off later because I wanna make this as easy as possible for me, but I also wanna make it as easy as possible for you. So I'm just gonna grab a big piece of just one piece, and I'm going to put it nowhere near the seam, just like right in the center on both the lining panels here on the back of this contrast. And then I'm going to take the paper off of the tape, and then I'm going to flip my panel so that it's exterior right side up. I'm gonna line up the midpoint marks on my panel with those midpoint pieces of tape I have. And now I'm just checking that I have the same amount of overhang on these A panels on the top and the bottom where the raw edge is. And for me, it's about 3/4 of an inch, it looks like. And then it's centered between them. The overhang on the outside, this all looks good. So I'm just gonna press it down like this. And then I grab some more tape. And since I am not top stitching this inner edge here, I'm just gonna add tape here to help hold it to that main panel. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and for me, I'm going to top stitch only along the outer edge on the big parts here from where my top stitching starts and stops from where I did it before, right? So like just the remaining outer edges. If you didn't top stitch fully the inside, you're also gonna top stitch the inside, all this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're just going from where you started or stopped on one top stitching to the next. Again, leave the tails really long. All right. Let's see how this worked. I'm gonna take all the tape off. I'm just gonna give it a quick fold in half to see how it looks. Make sure it's even on both sides. Yes, that's perfect. Isn't that gorgeous? And then I'm gonna reach in and I'm going to remove the double-sided tape from inside. You could probably leave it and pull this off at the very end. It might make it easier when you're working on the bag. If I need to, I can always add it again. So now we want to get all the threads to the back side of our A panels. So let's do this piece by piece. First, you should have 4 bobbin threads on the back side of these A panels. So let's pull on those bobbin threads and then carefully pull the top threads to the back. Okay, so you have your bobbin top threads here on the back, but you still have these other 2 threads from when you top stitched your accent piece on its own. And we need to pull those to the back with the other threads. This gives it a really polished look. So this is where we're gonna grab our needle again. And if you need a thimble, grab a thimble as well. I always like to have one. And you'll see all the threads are behind on the lining side of your accent panel. So I'm just going to insert both threads into the eye of my needle. And then I'm gonna separate the accent from the main A panel. And I'm gonna insert this into one of the holes that I have a stitch in on the A panel. Looking at the back, I'll pull the needle through. And now I should have, it's hard to see, but I have 4 threads here now, all on the back of the A panel, and I have no threads on the right side. So repeat that with your other 3 spots. And then once you have all the threads on the back, you can double them up and do 3 really tight knots. And then if you'd like, you can also grab some tape and add some tape over that knot to really secure it. And you can trim down the threads. So do this once again for the other 3 points. So there we go. And you know what? I still think I probably should have put some stabilizer on these A panels just because this contrast piece is so stable, and I think that's what makes the bag have a lot of stability. And this is kind of loosey-goosey. So just once again, it's not too late. If you wanted to, you could cut out smaller cuts of your Decovil Heavy and adhere it to these A panels for a lot of sturdiness. I'm not doing it because I want to see what it looks like in the end without it, but there we go. And so now we have our slip pockets here, okay? If you decided not to do the slip pocket and you have this stitch down, now's a good time to add your bag tag. And I think I'm gonna add a rivet now. So I'm gonna add a rivet close to where the stitching starts with my A panel, because you can see this is gonna rip that vinyl over time if it's just pulling on it all the time. So I'm going to measure in. Let's see, I'm gonna go right where the stitching is, and I'm gonna measure in about 3/8 of an inch in from the edge, like I said, right where that stitching connects with the A panel, and I'm gonna mark a little dot there. And that's where I'm gonna put my rivet. So I'm gonna do this for all 4 connection points. I don't wanna go too far in, but I also don't wanna be too close to the edge because I don't wanna accidentally punch a hole in the stitching. So if it's 1/4 of an inch for you, if you're more comfortable with that, you can do that. See, I'm doing more of like a scant 3/8 inch placement. All right, I think that looks good. I'm gonna grab my hole punch now, and I'm gonna punch through all 3 layers. Keep feeling like I'm doing something very wrong. I hope I'm not. Okay, so all 3 layers. You're gonna use your standard rivets for this, not the really long ones. We'll just push that through. Got through the glue, or got through the tape, and then we'll just snap it in place. Yeah, I think we're good. I think we're good. We'll see. Okay, once you have those snapped in place, you can grab your rivet press and just give them a good press. And this is gonna help a lot. This is a really easy, quick way, as long as you have the tools, to provide a lot of protection to your bag and a decorative element. I love rivets so much. I couldn't even tell you. I would say one of my favorite things about bag making is probably rivets. I love them. That is looking so good. And if you had like decorative rivets, you know, they make them in different colors and shapes and stuff, and they have some with gemstones, that would be a really fun accent because it just looks decorative, but it actually serves a very, very important purpose here. All right, so now we're gonna attach our zipper, and the first thing you're gonna do, something I know a lot of you guys hate doing, you're gonna completely separate the zipper. I know, we're gonna attach the zipper pull in the end. This is not a beginner bag. You should have experience attaching zipper pulls. So what we wanna do now is we wanna fold down the 2 ends of one of the zippers. So just make sure you're gonna be folding in the same side. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to pinch the fabric edge of the zipper tape until the coils rotate up and away from the center of the coils. And I'm going to line up the fabric edge of my zipper tape with the raw edge on the end of my zipper tape, just like this. You can go and top stitch this down at your sewing machine if you like, just use an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Or you can grab a lighter and carefully melt right where these things connect, and you can actually melt them into each other. But don't burn yourself, and I'll be honest, I burn myself every time. So while this might seem easier because you don't have to get the sewing machine involved, you could burn yourself, so be careful. But you see how it just pulls it off to the side like that? So then I'm gonna repeat that on the other part of my zipper tape, again, making sure I know I'm doing this end over here on the left, not on the right, because I'm keeping them on the same spot. So now grab your main panel. We're specifically looking at the front main panel. We're gonna measure 1 3/4 of an inch in from the left side here and mark right on the edge of the top of our main panel. So it's not the accent piece, it's the main panel behind it. And you're gonna do this for all 4 sides. So I just did it on the front panel, now I'm on the back panel, 1 3/4 of an inch in and mark. And then I'm gonna go over here to the right side. Once again, 1 3/4 of an inch in from the right. So now grab your zipper, and with the folded edge of your zipper tape that you just melted on the left, on both the top and the bottom, you're going to take your zipper tape and you're gonna lay it right side down. And so we're gonna flip this. The teeth are gonna be pointing away from the center, and the fabric edge is going to be right along the center, just like this. And the teeth are facing right side down. And we're gonna start where that 90-degree angle is, at the left side, where the first 1 3/4 inch mark is, and we're going to clip these together. If you'd like to use double-sided tape here, you might find that a lot easier. I might do that actually. I think I will do that just to show you, and also because it's easier for me. So I'm gonna grab some double-sided tape. This is 1/8 of an inch wide, and I'm going to attach it right along the edge of the straight parts of my A panels, only between those 2 marks on each side. Okay, so now I'm gonna replace my zipper tape here. And let's see, looking at the top, I'll remove the paper from my tape, and I'm gonna place the zipper tape right side down, fabric edge along raw edge of my A panel, and the 90-degree fold over is on the left. My front panel is on the bottom. I'm just trying to remind you, because you might have moved some stuff around while you were getting your tape out or something. I'm just here to be that voice in your head that says, don't forget. So I'm doing the same thing on the bottom, taping this down. There we go. And if you want to add clips as well, you can, but I think tape is going to be fine for me right now. Now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to baste these on at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. You can go over the zipper teeth where they fold over here. If you want to, it makes it a little bit easier to hold it down. But once you get to where the tail is, where it's not folded over, you want to veer your zipper tape away from the raw edge of the A panel. So away from that center gap between the 2 panels, veer your zipper tape away from that when you get to that marking on the right side or on the tail side. Okay, do this for both sides. Once we have these basted, take the tails of your zipper and just clip them both back towards the center so we don't get that in anything it's not supposed to be later. All right, you can set this to the side for now. So now let's work on this gusset. I don't know about you, but my tape is not holding those raw edges down. Okay, what we want to do is we want to center our contrasting connector piece over the back of the gusset, but we have some work to do first. So let's do all the technicalities. First thing, take your gusset and mark the midpoints on the 2 long edges just so you don't have to worry about doing that later. You might want to do the midpoints on the 2 short edges as well. That will probably help with attaching this little connector. Okay, so on your lower connector, measure in 2 inches from the short side and mark on the wrong side. So we're looking at the back where our raw edges are. You're going to do this on both sides of your lower connector. If you can remove all your clips, go for it. I can't because it'll all come undone. But we do want to measure in the 2 inches from each edge. And then grab some double-sided tape, and you're going to add the double-sided tape to the back over those raw edges between those 2 marks. So this will help hold it down if you're having trouble with it sticking like I am. Now, take your D-rings, or I have triangle rings here, and you're going to thread them on to each end. Just at the very end, you can do this on both sides. And then the D-ring part or the triangle part should be on the right side. The back part that I'm looking at right now should just be the flat part of your D-ring. And then you can remove some of the paper from your double-sided tape right here at the end. And you're going to fold down the very end of your strap so it's 1 1/4 inch fold. So from the raw edge to the folded edge is 1 1/4 of an inch. So there's one side, and when you do that, it will stick to the double-sided tape that's already there. Do this on the other side as well. And then I'm just gonna re-add the clips just to help me out a bit. I'm gonna push down that paper as well, again, just to make this easier, because now what we have to do is we wanna put this centered on our gusset, just like that, but we need to make sure it's in the right spot. So the ends where your hardware are should be 1 3/4 of an inch away from the short end of your gusset and centered. So try to get those in the right spot. And then once you're happy with that, you can start removing clips and taping it down. And I'll say mine is more like 1.5 inches away from the short edges. And you can always move this if you need to. Okay, you can get a ruler and measure from the long edges to the center if you'd like. Honestly, this is kind of an eyeball it kind of thing. It should just look fairly centered, but in the end, as long as it's not really close to a raw edge, you're not going to notice if it's not perfectly centered, so don't stress out about that. Just make sure it's taped in place. There we go. I forgot to add the tape on the ends here, so I'm going to go ahead and do that real quick just to make sure this doesn't get twisted around on me. So I'm just adding a little bit of double-sided tape over the previous double-sided tape, and then just below where the fold is. It doesn't need to be too close. We don't want to sew over any of this if we don't have to. I'm gonna do this for both ends. So I'm gonna repeat this on the other end. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine and we're gonna top stitch along both long edges of our connector and also right underneath the D-rings or your triangle rings, all at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Again, you can leave your threads really long and then pull them all to the back after you're done sewing and tie them off really tightly and add a little piece of tape over it, just like we did in the last step. And there you go, your gusset is now stitched on, and all we have to do is add some rivets. So I forgot about these rivets when I showed you all of the material I was gonna use today, but we're also gonna have 2 rivets that go right by these little D-ring or triangle ring connectors, and these are just gonna be centered in about 1/4 inch down from the top stitching on the lower connector. And this just makes sure that those stitches don't rip. Again, rivets serve a great purpose at providing a decorative element, but also a lot of extra support. So I'm just gonna punch out the holes, and I'm going through the lower connector and through the gusset. And then once again, these are just standard size rivets. These are not those extra long ones. The extra long ones are just for the straps. I'm just gonna pop these into place, and then I'll grab my rivet press and just press them down. Okay, so now grab your exterior gusset and your exterior main panels. See if I can get them all in the video. And we're gonna attach our gusset to the exterior. So let's start with the front panel. Lay your exterior front panel right side up, grab your gusset and lay it right side down. And you should have midpoints marked on the curved edges of your main panels and also midpoints along the long edges of your gusset. So start with those midpoint marks. Line those up and clip together, right sides together. And then drag up the top left corner of your gusset to meet with the top left corner of your front main panel. And I like to clip along the top as well, especially since this is a curve. It kind of pulls on it on the side, and that just helps it stay in place. So repeat this with the right side. So now I like to flip this over so I'm looking at the back of the main panel, and I'm just gonna kind of tuck it in, kind of like a bowl into the gusset. So the gusset stays straight up, but the main panel will kind of fold in on itself like a bowl. And then just clip along this long edge. So now we can take this to the sewing machine and we can sew along this clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I like to use a zipper foot for this, and I also like to sew it with the gusset wrong side up, and then make sure you back stitch at the beginning and the end. All right, once you have these sewn together, if you're using a thick vinyl and you want to do a second row of stitching just outside that first row, you can do that. Just make sure it's really close. Thick vinyl is gonna pull on that thread and you're gonna see it, but I have a more medium to lightweight vinyl, so that's fine. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna trim this seam allowance down in half, but not by the top. So I'm gonna leave about 1 inch up on the top here, and I'm just gonna snip into my seam perpendicular. And then I'm going to just go around this curved seam, cutting the seam allowance in half. Now, if you have pinking shears, you can use those. That's gonna be great. But I'm just gonna cut into it. And I might snip little notches too. I don't know. We'll see. And then when I get to the other side, I'm gonna wait until I get to about 1 inch away from the top, and then I'll just cut into the seam to cut that scrap off. Let's see, let's pop this. Isn't that fun with that lower connector accent? Yeah, I think it can use a little bit on the curves, so I'm gonna go around this curved edge just like every 1/2 of an inch to 3/4 of an inch, just snipping into this short seam allowance, but not getting to the threads. So I'm staying, away from the stitching. This will just allow those curved edges to fold out on itself. So it gives it a less frumpy finish. Yeah, that gives it a much rounder, easier finish. Perfect. So now we're gonna repeat this with the other side. So just flip that back panel over so it's right sides together with the other end of the gusset. Again, I'm looking at the back of the back main panel, and I'm gonna match up those midpoints first and clip right sides together. And then I'll go up to the top corners. Make sure you push this little folded bit of your accent out of the way. And I find I don't have to cut into the gusset at all. The gusset doesn't need extra room to spread. It's like a perfect fit. So if you find like your gusset's really tight and you're starting to see like little pinches or pleats in your main panel, you can definitely cut little snips into your gusset so that it can spread out and go around this curve of the main panel. But I find I don't need it. Okay, once again, I'm gonna flip my bag so it's gusset backside up, and I'm going to stitch around the curved edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Do a second row of stitching if you have a thicker vinyl, and I do suggest using a zipper foot for this. And then just like we did on the other side, we're gonna trim that seam allowance in half. Once again, leaving the top edges untrimmed, so about 1 inch on the top, and just carefully go around your seam, cutting it in half, or use pinking shears if you have it. And then once you get to the other end, make sure you stop about 1 inch away from the top, and then just cut the scrap off perpendicular to the seam. And then if you feel like you need it, cut little notches, these are just little snips, into the seam allowance. Again, being very careful to make sure you don't cut the stitching, because if you do that, you're gonna have a hole in your bag, which would be so sad. Okay, you can set this cutie patootie to the side. I cannot wait to see how this looks in the end. So now grab your little slip pocket, your lining slip pocket, and you're going to fold it in half, right sides together, the short bits of the ovals facing each other, and then just clip around the entire edge. And then mark yourself a small hole on the side, maybe about, let's see, what is this? This is like 1.5 inches or so, just to turn this out. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and we are going to sew along this curved clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, but not between these marked lines. So start at the top corner, backstitch, go down to the first mark, backstitch, skip over that opening, sew along the rest of it until you get to the other corner and backstitch. All right, now let's trim down the seam allowance to 1/8 inch, except for where we left our hole. I feel like that hole is a little bit smaller than I meant for it to be. It's gonna take some work. Where you left that hole in your stitching, you're going to leave the seam as is. It's gonna make it easier to close in the next step. I'm gonna grab my turning wand just in case. And now I'm gonna carefully push this through that little tiny hole and turn the pocket right side out. Maybe leave it at like a 2 inch to 2.5 inch size hole, not a 1.5 inch. That's the nice thing about turning wands, is you can just kind of jam all the stuff through the hole using the wand without hurting your fingers. Okay, looks a little wrinkly. You can press this with an iron if you'd like. I don't have the patience for that, so I'm just gonna add some clips along the seam and finger press it to get it into the shape. But you should be able to just kind of roll out that seam and get your little rounded pocket all good. So now that you have this pressed out, we're gonna take this to the sewing machine, and we're gonna top stitch along the top folded edge, that straight edge only, at 1/8 inch seam allowance. You can backstitch at the beginning and the end if you like, or you can leave the threads long and then just tie them into little knots on the back side. So now grab one of your lining main panels, make sure you have the midpoint marked on the top and the bottom, and then grab your little slip pocket here and mark the midpoint on the top edge that you just top stitched. And you're gonna measure down 2 inches from the top edge of your main panel, centered, and tape your pocket down in place just like this. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch around the curved edge of our pocket at 1/8 inch seam allowance. Once again, you can backstitch at the beginning and the end, or you can tie the threads off on the back side, whichever one you find easier. I know somebody will be worried about me sewing over the tape. I just wanted to show you this paper tape. It comes out of seams so easily. You just pull it right out. It's not super sticky. It just comes right out, and it causes no problems with your machine either. It does not gum up your needle. It's not like double-sided tape, which can be a little tricky to sew over. This is very easy to sew over. Okay, so this pocket is done. You can set it to the side. So now grab your remaining lining panel and your zipper pocket facing. And on your zipper pocket facing, ignore this top line. That was a mistake. On the zipper pocket facing, what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna measure 1 inch up from the bottom and draw a horizontal line that is 6 inches long. So I just center my ruler on here and draw 6 inches wide. And then I'm gonna draw a second line right above it that is 1/2 inch above it. This third line was an accident, ignore it. So you have 2 lines, one is 1 inch up from the bottom, and then the second line is 1/2 inch above that. And this is all done on the wrong side of your zipper facing. And then you're gonna take your zipper facing and lay it right side down, right sides together with your main panel, and you're going to use your midpoint marks on the zipper facing and the main panel to center this and have it 1/4 inch from the top. And then I'm once again just gonna use the paper tape to hold that in place. And now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and we're gonna sew along these 2 lines. And we're not making a square this time. We're not making a rectangle. We're just sewing the 2 lines. I know this is a little different. So you're just going to stitch from end to end on each of these 6-inch long lines. You can use a smaller stitch length, like a 2mm stitch length if you'd like. Back stitch really well at the beginning and the end of each line. So once you have those stitches in place, you're going to mark a 5-inch long line that is centered between these 2 stitch lines. So it should be 1/2 inch in on each side. And then you can use your marking tool to connect the tip of where the stitching is down to that end of your 5-inch line to create the little triangles. You should have experience doing a pocket like this, so you should know what we're doing. Now we're going to grab a seam ripper and gently seam rip along the center of our line here, just a little bit. And then you can grab your scissors and cut along that midpoint line until you get to the tip of your triangle, and then cut along the diagonal until you get to the tip of your stitching. And you should go right up to the stitching without cutting the threads. Do this for the other side as well. So once you have that cut, you're going to push the facing through the hole, pull it to the back, and press it so that the wrong sides of the facing are flat against the wrong sides of your main lining panel. Now, depending on your material, this can be easy or difficult. If you're using a nylon material, it can be kind of tricky. If you're using quilt cotton, you can iron it. If you're using waterproof or water-resistant canvas, you can iron it. If you have a lightweight water-resistant canvas like I do, you can just press it with your fingers, and that will be good enough. So now I'm going to grab my smaller zipper, and I'm going to add the zipper pull to it. And you can stitch over the ends of this zipper so you don't have to worry about the zipper pull coming off. I don't tend to do that because I don't really move the zipper around a whole lot, but I am going to melt down the edges of the zipper tape so it doesn't fray. Now you're going to grab your 2 zipper pocket panels, and you have a taller one and a shorter one. We're going to start with the taller one. So take the taller one, lay it right side up, grab your zipper, lay it right side up, and clip along the edge. The zipper, when closing, should close towards the left. And if you prefer to use double-sided tape for this, you can do that. I know some people really like to use that with their zippers. Now you can take this to the sewing machine and using your zipper foot, baste along this clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now you're going to flip this around and pull the zipper away from that lining panel, and then take your remaining lining panel and lay it right side up and attach the other zipper to the top of that lining panel. Both the new lining panel and the zipper are right sides up, and just make sure the sides of both lining panels match up on the left and right. And now take this to the sewing machine and baste along that clipped edge at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So now flip your zipper so it's right side up, and I'm going to grab some double-sided tape and just lay the double-sided tape right along the very edge of your zipper tape on both of the long edges. And then grab your lining panel that has the zipper facing window, and you can remove, I'm just going to do one at a time. I'm going to remove the paper from the top edge of my zipper. And then I'm going to grab my main panel and lay it over it. So main panel right side up and zipper right side up. And I'm going to center the coils in that window, flip it up, make sure you have some overhang on both edges. That should be good. Then I'll pull the zipper pull up, and then I'll flip up the main panel and facing and remove the paper from the bottom edge of my zipper tape. And then fold this down and give it a good press to hold it in place. Now the first thing we're going to do is go to the sewing machine, and we're going to top stitch along the top edge only. So on the main panel, an 1/8 of an inch away, only the top long edge. I'll just tell you now, we're not going to be stitching down the sides. We're only going to be stitching the top long edge and the bottom long edge. But for right now, only the top long edge, and both of the lining panels are facing down. Once you have that top edge top stitch, now flip both of your lining zipper pockets up so they're peeking out the top of the main panel. Press down on the bottom long edge, and now we're going to top stitch along the bottom long edge only at an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I do like to back stitch just once at the beginning and the end, and then I also tie off the threads on the back. Alrighty, now that you have that done, you can trim off the bottom edges of your pockets. So I'm just lifting it up and matching it with the curve. Like the pattern says, it does not have to be exact or perfect. Just trim it down a little bit so it's not overhanging. And now what we're going to do is we're going to flip the main panel away from our lining panels. And if you have overhang of your zipper facing, go ahead and trim that down as well. And with this flipped up, we're going to sew along each of the edges of our zipper pocket panels. Now, when we do this, the goal is that we're going to catch the little triangles that are poking out from our zipper facing. That is important because we don't have any closure over here with the top stitching on the corners. So make sure these are tugged out and they look nice and neat on the front. And we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and this, since my pocket's not totally centered, it's going to be a bigger seam allowance on the right than it is on the left. Just, again, making sure that you're stitching down that triangle as you go down, back stitching at the beginning and the end, and you're only doing the sides, you're not doing the bottom edge. Okay, so once those are sewn down, now your pocket is all good to go, and you don't have to worry about the zipper coming undone or anything. Okay, before we finish up the lining, I want to do this real quick because this is a step that requires glue, and you want it to dry, and I want to make sure it's ready to go when we get there. So this is the strap keeper, and it's top stitch on all the edges. What we're going to do is we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to cut it in half. So just fold it and cut. And then we're going to take these to the sewing machine, and we're going to fold the strap keeper right sides together so that raw edge on the back is showing. And we're going to sew along each of the short ends of each strap keeper at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching really, really well at the beginning and the end of each of them. All right, so once you have those stitched, you're going to fold them so you can press the seam open. And this is just a little tricky, but I find it works fine with what I have. I don't have any super glue, but I have my Beacon 3-in-1 and I have clips, and that's what I'm gonna use. So what we're gonna do, don't turn these right side out yet. We're still looking at the wrong side of them. We're gonna take one of our strap keepers and we're gonna flatten it together like this so that the seam can spread open. So on the back of one edge of my seam, I'm gonna add a pretty generous amount of glue, and I'm going to press it down so it's open, and I'm gonna use clips to hold it in place, because since this is a vinyl or faux leather, it's not going to stay on its own. Give it a good press. I'm going to repeat that with the other edge of that seam. Since we can't top stitch this seam down and we need this bulk to be distributed evenly, which is why we're pressing it open, this is how we do it. Now, if you don't have this glue, but you have super glue, then go ahead and use that. Just do your best to use clips to really hold it down. As long as you let it stay like that while it dries, it'll be okay. But if you let it pop up while it's drying, it's not gonna stay down. Okay, now set these to the side and let those dry. So now let's finish our lining. Grab both of your lining main panels and your lining gusset panel, and make sure you have midpoints marked on the two long edges of the gusset and the top and bottom of each main panel. Let's start with the slip pocket main panel. Lay that right side up. Grab your gusset and lay it right side down, right sides together, and match up that midpoint on the bottom and clip together. And then pull up the left corner of your gusset on the very top left corner on the back side of your gusset, and line that up with the top left corner of your main panel and clip together. This is just like we did on the exterior. And then repeat that on the top right corners. And I'm going to flip this over so I'm looking at the back of the lining panel while I tuck in my lining, keeping the gusset straight, and just clip along the raw edges. Now you might find with your lining you have some pleating. You can definitely clip into your gusset, like cut little notches into your gusset so that it can spread and go around that. To be honest, I don't mind a little bit of pinching and pleating in the lining because I feel like it's not noticeable at all. But if you like it to look perfect everywhere, then by all means, let that gusset spread around those corners. Okay, so now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew along this clipped edge. We're going to do it with the gusset facing wrong side up. And you're going to start at a 3/8 inch seam allowance on the top corner. And then you're going to increase your seam allowance to a 5/8 inch seam allowance as you go around the bottom. And then before you get to the next top corner, you're going to, again, reduce it to a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Make sure at the top corners by about at least an inch, the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch. Everywhere else, much bigger. Okay, once you have that sewn, once again, we're going to trim the seam allowance in, but leave the top inch on each edge as is. So just cut into the seam and trim your seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. And then once you get to the other edge, make sure you stop about 1 inch and cut away just like that. Okay, so So now for the other lining pocket, make sure your zipper is open and then take the bottom edge of your zipper pocket lining panels and clip them towards the top. We don't want to sew those down. This is important. Flip your lining panel right side up. Grab your gusset, flip it right side down, and starting on the bottom again, line up those midpoint marks and clip right sides together, and then clip the corners right sides together. And then I'm just gonna go to the back side of this remaining panel and tuck it in and clip it to the gusset. Okay, now before you sew this, we need to leave a hole in the lining. And you want this hole to be centered on the bottom in between 6 and 7 inches. I know it's a big hole, but trust me, it's gonna be easy to sew closed in the end. So you want this nice and big so we can turn the whole bag out through this. So if you have a structured or thick vinyl, make sure it's on the bigger side. So now we're gonna go to the sewing machine, and just like we did on the other side, we're gonna start at a 3/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning. And then as you go down, increase your seam allowance to 5/8 of an inch. Once you get to that first mark, backstitch really well, lift up your needle, jump over that marked opening on the bottom, continue on with backstitching and then sewing at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, and then as you get to the top, decrease it to a 3/8 inch seam allowance and backstitch at the end. So once you have that sewn, once again, don't clip down the seam allowance on the top edge, leave it about 1 inch, and then trim down your seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch until you get to the opening. Don't trim down the seam allowance at the opening. You'll be very sad if you do that. So leave that opening untouched and then just trim again the seam allowance to 1/8 of an inch except for 1 inch by the top edge. And there's a lot of very specific things. This is a technical bag. It's not difficult, it's just technical. You gotta pay attention. All right, you're just about done making the bag. This is gonna be so good. You guys are gonna love this. So we have the exterior and it's right side out, and I still have my zippers clipped out of the way. Also take these little bits that are on the top here from the overlay and tuck those in. Yes, you're gonna wrinkle it, that's fine. And your zippers, you don't really want them clipped to the top edge, so you can take them and just kind of clip them together and then shove those zipper ends to the bottom. There we go, because right now we're gonna be focused on this top edge here and we don't want anything to get in the way. Now take your lining panel and flip it so it's right side out. And we're gonna take our lining and we're gonna push it into the bag so they're right sides together, and the zipper lining pocket is gonna go right sides together with the back panel. It's your choice, you can put it wherever you want, but that's what the pattern suggests, and that's where I like too. I like the zipper pocket to be on the back side of the bag. When it comes to usability, I feel like that's the easiest place for it to be. So now use your midpoint marks on the top of your lining and your exterior and clip these right sides together. Again, making sure nothing else is joining the seam. This is only for the exterior and the lining. And then you can come over to your seams on the side, and if you'd like, you can add some double-sided tape to the back of these seams to hold them open, or you can just press them really well. So you're gonna press the exterior seams where you left that inch uncut open, and you're gonna press your lining seams open. And once again, push those little like handle bits from your overlay down and line up the seams so that they are spread open and right sides together. And do this with the other side as well. So now take a peek where the ends of your zipper are. So the tails of your zipper, remember how it veers off the edge? Just make sure it's still veering off and then not folded or messed up or anything. And then carefully clip the lining and exterior right sides together around that zipper section. I find it's easy for those zippers to kind of get pinched. So I want to smooth them down and then clip the materials in place over it. And then just go around the rest of the bag, clipping the exterior and the lining right sides together. Okay, now we're gonna take this to the sewing machine and we're gonna carefully sew along this top edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. I'm gonna sew from the inside of the bag, so I'm just gonna lay this on my bed and sew around the top clipped edge at a 3/8 inch seam allowance. Backstitch really well at the beginning and the end. If you have a thick vinyl, do a second row of stitching just a scotch closer to the seam to make sure you reinforce those threads. Once you have that sewn, pull your lining out, and then on the big hole in your lining panel, pull the whole bag through that. Now put your hand in that lining hole and let's push out all the edges. These colors are so pretty. can twist out that top accent. Oh, hello. You are a nice looking bag, aren't you? Yes, you are. I'm excited. I'm excited about this bag. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to push the lining in. Don't worry about closing up the holes or anything just yet, because we need to top stitch. This is probably one of the trickier parts of this bag, is top stitching that top edge. So be careful, grab lots of clips, and what we're going to do is we're going to go around this top edge, move everything out of the way, and I'm looking at the seams over here on the sides where we have it spread open, and I'm just making sure it stays spread open with my fingers while I kind of roll out this seam and then add a clip. So I'm going to start with these 4 seams, because if they start twisting on themselves and getting bulky, that's when you have issues with your tension, or you have issues with needles breaking. Don't worry about your zipper tail just yet. We'll deal with that in a moment. Once you have those seams done, now let's go to the zipper tail section, and you're going to pop your zipper so that the coils are facing straight up, and your zipper tails just kind of go off into the air like that. And then you can grab a clip to kind of hold down that seam. And if you feel like these clips are not quite long enough, you can use like the hair clips that we use a lot of the times, because it does have to wrap around the zipper. So I'm just carefully going around, rolling out the seam and clipping it. The nice thing about the zipper area of the seam is that if your lining isn't rolled perfectly lower than your exterior, you're never going to notice it because the zipper blocks that. So you can be kind of loosey-goosey there. But over here on the sides where there's no zipper, you do want to roll the seam over a bit so the lining's kind of hidden. So repeat this with the other side. Okay, so now this part is tricky. If you want, you can top stitch from the inside of the bag, just like how we sewed it. Just know that your bobbin thread is what you're going to see on the outside, and I don't really like that look. So I am going to take the table off my sewing machine, and I'm going to wrap this around the arm of my sewing machine and carefully top stitch along all the top edges at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Keep those zipper tails up and away, so when you top stitch around this one, you're just going to pull it kind of out towards the right carefully and just keep stitching. If you want to top stitch from the inside of the bag, you just have to turn this out. So right now we have exterior facing out. You're just going to flip it so it's the lining out and the exterior is on the inside, so you can top stitch it like that. Okay, that was actually not difficult, which is awesome. I think I used just the right material. So now we're going to close this hole that's in the lining, which is a big hole. So what we're going to do that is you're going to open up your zipper pocket in the lining, and you're going to gently pull the lining panel through the zipper. So remember, the zipper pocket in the lining has a hole in it as well. You can actually tug the bottom of your main lining panels through that hole, and now you're just looking at the bottom raw edge of your lining main panels. And remember, we didn't trim these down, so all you have to do is once again like line up your midpoints. And this is the bottom of my lining main panels, and just clip along these edges in that little opening you left. And you can just go sew along this one spot at a 5/8 inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. Once you have that sewn, you can trim that seam allowance down also to 1/8 of an inch, just so we don't have a bunch of bulk on the bottom of our bag. And then shove that lining back into the bottom of the bag. Okay, so now you gotta close the last hole, which is the zipper pocket. So pull that up, and then all you have to do is fold these raw edges in on themselves. Now I know they're curved, but I'm not gonna leave them curved. I'm just gonna fold it down however's easiest. 3/8 of an inch, 1/2 of an inch. It doesn't really matter to me. I just don't want raw edges, so I'm just folding it in and making sure the folds match up. And then I'll take this to the sewing machine and just top stitch along that clipped edge at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end. You can see I snuck in a little bag tag there. So now we're just going to push the lining pocket into the zipper pocket. All right, I think we're done sewing. I think the sewing part is now done. Now we just have to install hardware and the straps. So let's start with this zipper. And like I said, I know my zipper end doesn't match all the rest of the hardware. It'll be fine. So don't lose your teeny tiny screws. There we go. So the first thing we have to do is install the zipper pull. So you can pull these together and then go up to the top. Just want to make sure they're the same length. And then just thread on your zipper pull. Pull it all the way on and make sure it matches over here on the end. Make sure it's not like really off or anything. You can always trim down the raw edges of your zipper, but you can't do anything about the left side. How stinking cute is that? It's such a neutral bag too, which I love. Okay, zipper end. I'm going to melt down this fraying edge. And what I'll do is I'll just fold these zipper corners in on themselves and then tuck this into my zipper end like that and screw it in place. But first I want to add some glue to it just to help, because glue just makes everything better. So you can see I have the two corners folded in on the back here. If you want to use some double-sided tape or something to keep them there, you can. But I'm just gonna fold them, glue it, and then smush it into the end of my hardware. Just try your best not to get any of the glue on the exterior of your material. If it gets on your hardware, that's fine. You can pull it off later. And then I'm gonna flip to the back of my zipper end. I'm gonna grab a teeny tiny screw and a teeny tiny screwdriver, and I'm just going to screw this into place. And there we go. Zipper is done. I'm gonna let this dry and then I can just tuck this into the bag and you never even see it, which is why I'm not worried about the hardware color being different. Okay, this is where we wanna make sure we keep track of everything. So I have my little left and right tags here, and then a couple of clips to go with it, and I have my hardware. I pretty much just really wanna make sure I have this here. Do we even need, I don't even think we need the swivel hooks. Why did I make those? Anyways, but I have the strap sliders here, and then we can check on these and see if the glue is dry. And it is feeling pretty good and dry. As long as that's dry, you can then flip your little strap keepers right side out, which is tricky because they are tiny. Okay, so take your two side connectors, and I'm gonna have the top stitching on the top of each one of these, and we're gonna mirror them. So I have the single fold going in on both of them. So the single fold on the top strap is on the bottom, the single fold on the bottom strap is on the top. So the other side has the two folds. Single fold is there. We're gonna also want our long rivets for this. Okay, so with the single fold edges mirroring each other both on the inside, you're gonna measure in 1/4 inch from each short edge and mark a dot centered. These are gonna be rivet placements. And then on the right side over here, you're gonna measure in 7 inches from the right and mark dots there. These should all line up in the same spot. And then grab your hole punch, and everywhere you have a dot, you're gonna punch a hole. So you're gonna have 6 total. So now this is where we're gonna mark things left and right. The top strap is going to be the left strap. The bottom strap is going to be the right strap. So I'm just gonna mark them like that. So now grab your bag and lay it face up. And if you haven't already, you can tuck in that zipper inside the bag. And we're gonna start with the right strap. So bring your right strap over to you. And you're going to line it up so that the single fold edge is facing the front. So it's facing the top here. And we're gonna work on the edge that has the longer piece here. So let's see, let's put this tag on here. I think it'll be easier for you. So I'm gonna keep the tag on the right side of the strap, and this is where I have that 7-inch hole over here. We're gonna flip this down, and the 7-inch hole end is gonna go towards the top, and then the other end is gonna thread from the outside of this bag under this little bit of your contrast and through. And so when you do this, the edge you're looking at right here on the top should be the single fold edge, and you're gonna bring up that rivet hole to meet that middle-ish, the 7-inch rivet hole, just like that. So line them up as best you can and clip together. Oops, by the way. So this is what you should have, just like this. This is where I had my tag up there. We can remove this clip and take one of your strap keepers, and you're gonna slide this on so that the seam part of the strap keeper is facing the inside of the bag. So inside like this, and you're gonna slide it over the top, and then you're gonna slide it around the 2 pieces on the bottom, just like that. And then you're gonna take this top edge of your strap keeper, and you're gonna thread it from the bottom of your slider up. Why didn't anybody tell me I had buckles? I don't know why I have those buckles. This is a slider. My goodness, it's been a day, guys. So this is a strap slider, and you want to slide it from the bottom up and over the center bar and down the other side. So give it a good amount of slack, and you're gonna pull down that edge that has the hole, and it's gonna meet with the other two holes. So all three of the holes that we punched on this one strap should all meet together right here. And this is where you're gonna want those long rivets to go through all this. And this is really, I mean, if you're using a thinner material, you might be able to get away with a smaller rivet, but I found I had to get the longer rivets. There we go. That's gonna hold them all together. So now I'm gonna grab my rivet press, and I'm gonna press this rivet into place. And now what we wanna do is we wanna move this strap keeper up to kind of just cover that. But do your best to wiggle it over that rivet, just like that. And then we also wanna add glue. So this is where you gotta be a little bit careful. I'm just gonna kind of pull it away and just jam some glue in there. And we're gluing on the back side. So where that seam is, that's where the glue is. We're not gluing on the front side. So it's like the inner side of the strap. And then I can even just use one of these clips here to kind of hold it. Maybe on the bottom as well. There we go. We just don't want that to move. It's really just, I mean, it's kind of decorative, honestly. It's just to make sure you don't see all that mess in there. But we don't want it to move. So now we're gonna repeat this with the other side. So I'll walk you through it. Once again, the side of our left connector that has the two closer holes is gonna be up top. The single fold is going to be facing up. When we look at it like this, we're gonna thread it from the outside of the bag underneath that accent and up, and have the rivet hole on the edge here meet with the other rivet hole. You can clip those in place. And then before you put your slider on, you're going to attach your little strap keeper and make sure the seam part is on the inside of the strap facing the center of the bag. And just slide this on over the fold over on the bottom. And then line up those rivet holes on the bottom again. Slide the end of your side connector over that middle bar, bring it down, and then all three holes should now be lined up. Grab your long rivet and press it through all three of them and snap it in place. And then grab your rivet press and press down this rivet. And now we just want to add some glue. Remember, the glue only goes on the back side here where that seam is, and where the fold over raw edge is showing. So you can just add some glue kind of over your rivet and right along that raw edge of your side connector. And then gently bring up the strap keeper so that it covers the rivet and the raw material. And then again, you can just use a clip to kind of hold it in place. It's only being glued on the back. It's not glued on the front at all. Okay, now the last step. This can be a little tricky. We'll see. So when you look at the front of your bag, right side up, and you lay your straps on their sides, both of them should have the single fold facing you, like that. So when you grab your strap, however long it is, you want to make sure you only have the single fold facing up as well. We just want to keep it, you know, cohesive. So what you're going to do, we're going to start on the right side over here. I'm going to take the right side of my strap, and I'm going to thread it from the right of my side connector, from the bottom up, and this can be a really tight fit. I'm going to thread a good amount like that, and then I need to thread it over, which, like I said, it can be a very, very tight fit. That's okay. If you need to use pliers to help, you can. And I'm not even using like the right kind of strap slider. I'm using one that's meant for thinner material, but it's even okay. So as long as your material is not too thick, it's fine. So you're going to slide it through the hardware, and then you also have to slide it through your strap keeper, and that's the tricky part. So take your time to wiggle this in, and this is also why we did not add glue on this side of our strap keeper. So you might find you do need to kind of get some pliers in there to help you pull it out. All right, once you got it through, it took me a good amount of finagling, okay? You gotta, it's very tight fit, but it's supposed to be. We're gonna just pull it out, and we can adjust this later, and then that's why this is supposed to be a D-ring. What a freaking day, man. So the whole reason this is supposed to be a D-ring over here is so you can thread it through the D-ring. Now I can still thread it through the bottom part of my triangle ring, and then I can just use the holes in the triangle bit to attach like a keychain or something. Okay, so we're just gonna thread that down. So decide how far you want it to thread down. I'm gonna have it thread down about 3 inches. So I'm gonna pull this up a little bit. There we go. And then you can kind of pull up on your strap over underneath the strap keeper, and then you can also adjust it on the strap adjuster. Okay. Even with all the mistakes I've been making, it's still turning out really cute. So, you know, sometimes that's just the day you have. So now we're going to repeat this on the other side. So we're going to take the other side of our strap and we're going to thread it from the inside of our strap slider from the bottom up. And then over and down the other side. Just want to make sure it's nice and long because you have a lot of things to thread this through. And then the tricky part, make sure you get it straight, threading it through that strap keeper and then pull it through that strap keeper. And then if you have a D-ring, just slide it into the D-ring, no problem. If hopefully you did not make the same mistake as I did, I will have a lot of pop-ups everywhere in the video. But even if you did the triangle ring like I did, you can slide it in. It's a tight fit, just like it is everywhere else. And just make sure it has the same amount of overhang as the other side. So I want to do 3 inches. So I'm going to pull this up a bit. There we go. Okay, so just check the sides and make sure they're both good. Pattern has this overhang quite a bit, so it's up to you. I'm just going to do 3 inches on each side. Make sure they're both the same. And then I'm going to adjust over here on the left. Okay, the last thing is putting on our little strap ends. So once again, we're going to grab our glue, and then we have our hardware and our tiny screws and our tiny screwdriver. I'm going to also use a stiletto to help with this. And what I want to do is first make sure your edges are cleaned up. If they're a little wonky or anything, trim them down so it's the same size. You have a nice flat edge. I'm going to add some glue just right along the very edge. Not too much. You don't want to make a big old mess here. And then I'm going to thread my strap end on here. So on the back where the screw holes are, I'm just going to kind of press a little hole in with my stiletto. That just kind of gives the screws somewhere to go. And then I'll carefully take my tiny screws and screw them into place. All right, and there you go. And that will also help prevent this from ever coming out through the triangle ring here, if it's not going to because it's so tight, but if it was like a regular D-ring, this would really help with that. So now I'm going to repeat that with the other strap end. Okay, even when almost every step I made a mistake, it still turned out so cute. It's a very cool bag. It has a lot of cool features. It has these slip pockets. Now I'm gonna fill it up with some stuff and we're gonna see how it looks. But this is a bag that you gotta pay attention to, and you can see the steps where I didn't focus, I didn't plan out properly. It still works out. I mean, you do what you gotta do with what you got, right? But it is a really, really cool bag, friends. Here's the thing. Some days you're just off. And I'm gonna be honest, today was the day I was just off from mistaking a strap slider with a buckle to pretty much doing everything wrong. Somehow, I still ended up with an amazing bag. Like, stunning, gorgeous. You probably wouldn't know, unless you watched the video, how much I struggled. Not because of the pattern or the material, but because my brain is in a fog, apparently. But it still worked out. And look at this. Like, look at the difference between this bright, like, printy one and this more neutral one. So you can see, like, this is funky. This is, like, going out somewhere very wild and fun. This is every day. This is a more neutral bag. This is a mother-in-law bag. This is just like an easy bag to gift. Look at that accent on the gusset with that. Isn't that so good? It turned out so good. Also, we kept it as slip pockets, which I think is so cool. I'm trying to see. Okay, I have my phone here. So yeah, you can just stick your phone in there. Now, it does separate from the rest of the bag. The main part of the bag does lose its shape just a bit, because we don't have that really structured bit of Decoville Heavy holding it together. So that is something to think about. Like I said, if you wanted to add the Decoville Heavy to the main panels in the Gusset, that's definitely an option. My suggestion is just keep it out of the seam allowance unless you have a nice heavy, you know, duty machine. But it's still great. Like, it has a bit of slouch, and that Decoville Heavy still provides a lot of structure for the bag, even though it's not fully attached along the top edge here. So I hope you enjoyed sewing with me today. If you give this bag a shot, let me know. I want to see your versions. The pattern has a lot of inspiration pictures that I was just scrolling and scrolling and scrolling through when I was trying to pick out my material. This has a very country western feel to it as well if you use the right materials, which would be really fun to make. You can make it bright, you can make it all one color, just make it very chic and just let the layering kind of be the contrast and the fun bit. I don't know, it's a fun pattern to play with, so I hope that you enjoy making this bag as much as I do. Thank you so much for sewing with me today. I hope you're having a great day. Have a fantastic rest of your week. Get out there and make something. Bye guys!